So today we're answering a question from a viewer who goes on to ask, yo, Elliott, how does one deal with immature adults like my father? Totally understand your question, man. In fact, this week I was having a conversation with a friend about how the world is loaded with old people, but very few elders. And the difference is huge. An old person is oftentimes just a childlike person in an older body that doesn't exemplify any kind of wisdom. Where an elder is someone who has accumulated wisdom in their life and is held in high regard. If you look at our traditional societies, oftentimes old people were looked at with veneration, and they were sought out for guidance and advice, and we would respect them and listen to what they had to say. Where today, it almost seems like people are getting older, but in many cases, dumber, especially with the advances in technology and information that's available to us, that you can avail yourself to. It seems like, well, we just got a lot of people that have been here a long time. They're old, and even their mindset, most people's understanding is not wisdom, it's intellect, it's information. And so if the brain is used like a storage container, rather than considering the human being an open system for evolution, then information gets outdated, right? Because we worship and venerate information, someone who is old just might have old information. And so the type of respect that would be afforded someone like that is diminished. But wisdom doesn't require information, right? Like if you're going to gauge someone's maturity level based on how they can serve you through guidance and speaking, right? Advice. On one hand, there's information. On the other hand, there's wisdom. And wisdom doesn't come from facts. Wisdom isn't knowledge. Wisdom is lived experience and is often relayed through stories. In fact, elders were known mainly for keeping their mouths shut in regard to affairs of young folks unless they came to them seeking their wisdom, and it was often couched in stories because the wisdom of the older person lent to a behavior that was very prudent, cautious, humble when dealing with people, young people that are still dealing in the world, right? So rather than it being like an admonishment or this is what you should do, this is what you should not do, which is what you're going to get from an immature old person that's just loaded with information, a elder is going to tell you a story. They're going to honor the situation that you're in. They're not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but a parable, perhaps. And if you look at the life of Jesus Christ, you notice the same thing. He doesn't give us any information at all. He's not spitting facts. He's telling stories and giving demonstrations. That's what you would experience in the presence of a wise man, a wise person. But we ain't got too many of those. And I understand why you're lamenting over this, right? How do I deal with these immature, right? Old people that have no wisdom, and they're operating based off of old information, dead ideas that no longer apply or even are detrimental to my life, your life. So we got to forgive them. And this is very poignant, especially as it relates to your father, my man. We got to be careful. Yes, perhaps your father is less mature than you or those in your world would like him to be. But the very judgment against your father backfires. It's a boomerang that will come back as a judgment on you. And this is not just me saying this. This is an ever-present piece of wisdom that has been passed down for generations. That the way you relate to your father is going to have a tremendous impact as to how you relate to yourself as an authority and other father figure, authority figures in the world. This is why the Bible says, honor your mother and father. And it's the only commandment. It's the only commandment that offers a promise. Honor your mother and father so that your days will be long and prosperous. And I think it has less to do with the figure of your material mother and father and more to do with the concept of venerating your ancestry, honoring your lineage, honoring your DNA even, because to reject your essence. And have you ever heard, like when you blow your load, they call it your essence. This is the term that's used for a man's white fluid. You are the essence of your father. Your father's essence brought you forth. You don't have to like that idea, but it's a fact. His blood is flowing through your veins. His DNA is in your cells. You're breathing your breath because of him. And I'm not saying that you owe him your life because you do. What I'm saying is you owe him your honor because of who he is. And it's going to benefit you, right? Because if we're upset with our parents, if you're upset with your father, and this concept of the father is so damn important when it comes to the life of men. But if we're upset with our father, if we're upset with our ancestors, we're upset with the people that are supposed to be our leaders, we will have a tendency to fall short in our own regard. Why? Because if my father represents authority, actually, let me give you my example, because I fell into the same trap that you did by measuring my father against the standards that are of this world rather than spiritual standards that help us evolve, the standards that cause us to fall. My father was a very tough man as a kid growing up. He didn't abuse us, but he was tough. He let us know that he was in charge, and if he asked us to do something, we had to do it. So in a way, we were a little afraid of my dad. Love my dad to death right now. My kids laugh at him because he's a lot older now. So he jokes, but once again, he never joked. He never joked and was always serious. And I got whiff of this idea, this feminist idea that a father should be soft. And I had friends that had fathers that were soft. And I saw soft men on TV. And then I would hear my mom say things against my dad like he's too hard. And so all of a sudden, now I'm beginning to judge my essence, my father, the seed of my life, on standards that I didn't actually agree to. They were sort of shoved down my throat. And for many years, up until I think I was about 27 years old, and by that point, I think I already had 3 daughters. So it took me that, and I think it'll take a lot of us becoming fathers ourselves, to actually honor and see the truth about your father. The truth about my father was that he was a good dad. He was a really good dad. And a big part of the reason why a lot of my friends ended up way worse off, and a lot of my cousins ended up way worse off than I did. In fact, I remember my uncles used to argue with my dad that my dad was too hard on us. This is interesting. So we used to have a lot of family come over our house when I was a kid, and it was my dad, and he had 8 brothers that would come over quite frequently. And my dad was tough. My dad was known to my cousins to be the tough one. Nobody wanted to fuck with Uncle Eddie. If something was going to happen, if you were going to get in trouble, they would say, "Well, I'm going to go tell Uncle Eddie." My dad was the threat. You're going to go tell Uncle Eddie. And I remember hearing stories about how my uncles would denigrate my dad for that and say, you're too hard on your children and they're going to resent you. And I'm thinking of one uncle in particular because I remember the conversation. I was very young. And he was explaining to my dad that your children are going to resent you because you're too hard on them. And I'm peeking up, I'm listening. I'm like, yeah, uncle, tell them, chill out. Craziest story, but 20 years later, 30 years later, we're adults now, and my dad's children are all doing fairly well. And we love him, and our family's pretty tight-knit. But my cousins who had dads that were more permissive, no relationship at all. resentfulness. One of my uncles died not too long ago. It was a sad situation, but his children didn't respect him. So my man, coming full circle with this conversation, number one, we're in a world where we lack elders. But it's only because we lack a respect for and appreciation for wisdom. We're too attached to intellect. We're too attached to information. And if you're gauging the maturity level of the people in your life, the older people in your life, on the information, you're a part of the problem. You're a part of the problem because information grows old, it becomes dead, and it's immature because information is always changing. And we live in an age of information and it's almost dizzying. Seek out wisdom in quiet older men. These are the elders. The elders don't broadcast their wisdom like I do. I'm not an elder. Maybe on my way. But they're not trying to tell anybody what to do. They're not giving anybody advice. They're sitting there quietly, maybe reading their Bible and waiting for you to come and ask for a good word. But they're few and far between. Rather than lament that, grow in wisdom yourself, because guarantee with the glut of information that's available now with AI, wisdom is going to grow in value more and more. And wisdom is always relayed in stories, through experience, and not information. And when it comes to your father, man, don't judge him too hard, because the measuring stick by which you measure your father is the measuring stick by which you're going to measure yourself. And that measuring stick was probably given to you by a world that hates masculinity, that hates fathers, and that is offering you a chance to hate yourself as a result. Father represents God the Father in the home, and you are a son of God. Reconcile it in your heart through abandonment to divine providence. Forgive your father and do better. Done.